Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting on intelligent apps with Azure Functions. Ask the experts. Really appreciate everyone joining us today. If you're watching it later, hopefully you enjoy the content. Please ask some questions. We'd love to answer your questions during this session. So if you have any, please submit those. We'll review them, and then we'll answer some questions along the way. So please engage, and hopefully some of the content is useful for you as well. My name is Eamon O'Reilly. I'm a lead product manager on Azure Functions, and I'm joined today by Paul, Ramya, and Sonia. And so I'll let them introduce themselves. I'll start with Paul. Paul, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and what you work on?
Thanks, Eamon. Hey, everybody. I'm Paul Iknovich. I also work on product with the team here.
Perfect. And Ramya?
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Hey, I'm Ramya Auraganti. I'm currently working as a PM with Functions team. My focus areas are enabling functions on Kubernetes-based environments like ACA and AKS. Yeah, excited to be part of this forum. Look forward to a great discussion on topics. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Ramya. And Sonia?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Sonia. I am the PM lead working on non-traditional languages and client tooling, so the customer experiences using Azure Functions. Great to be here.
Awesome. So let me start with a couple of slides, and then hopefully we'll stop and you guys will have a chance to ask some questions, and we'll go over and see if we can answer those. So for those of you who may not be that familiar with Azure Functions, I wanted to kind of give a brief overview of, what is Azure Functions and what are some of the scenarios you might be doing inside your organization to take advantage of Azure Functions when you're building your own applications. So Azure Functions at the core is an event-based service that basically allows you to build applications that respond to events in your organization. And those might be HTTP events, so if you're building serverless APIs, or they might be where you're trying to process real-time events as they come through a streaming service. And so anytime you're trying to think about an application that you're trying to build and it could benefit from event-driven architecture, then Azure Functions is definitely the way to go. And there's kind of 4 core things that we offer inside of Azure Functions. And the first is what we call the integrated programming model. And what we're really trying to enable for our developers inside of organizations is to easily interact with all these external services. And so you might be using event hubs or storage queues, you might be using blobs, you might be using Kafka, whatever kind of external system you're using to capture events. What our integrated programming model allows you to do is to listen onto those different services, automatically get those events for you, and then hand them into your code so you can just process the business logic. And then after you're done processing the business logic, we allow you to send that updated data back into the different services, like you might want to send it to SQL or Cosmos or back into another event system so it can be processed by other Azure functions. And so what really the integrated programming model offers you is that abstraction, so you don't have to worry about all the plumbing, how to connect to the events, how to get the events, all of that is taken care of for you inside the integrated programming model. And of course, it works across all of our languages we have in Azure. So if you're a Java developer, a .NET developer, a Python developer, or a Node developer or PowerShell, that integrated programming model is consistent no matter what language you pick and works the same across our environment. The other big thing that we offer inside of Azure Functions is this end-to-end development experience. And so one of the things we've been focusing on over the last few years since we introduced Azure Functions was how do we kind of increase your velocity when you're building these intelligent apps and trying to deploy them onto the cloud. And so when we talk about that problem, we really want to think about, okay, what does that inner loop experience look like for developers when they're just trying to do a POC, they want to build it on their machine, they want to see what value they can get out of the service and build their application. But it goes all the way through how you do your CI/CD, how you do the deployment up onto Azure, how you monitor it, how you manage it for security and policy. That whole end-to-end lifecycle is something we focused on with Azure Functions. And you can see in a lot of the work we do that we've optimized that inner loop experience, and then we've optimized kind of that outer loop deployment experience monitoring as well. So that's one of the benefits you get by adopting our programming model, but adopting our host. And the benefit, because all of our stuff is open source, it allows you to have that full rich experience locally, and it's guaranteed to run the same way you run it when you deploy it into different environments. And speaking of the different environments we offer in Azure Functions, there's a whole set of kind of environments that you can deploy your function application to. So you might build your function application to process some events that are coming through, with Event Grid or Event Hubs. And then you're saying, okay, I need this to integrate with other types of applications that I'm building as part of my larger workload. And those applications might be hosted in different environments. So if you're just having a standard Azure Functions event-driven architecture, you can deploy that into our serverless environments. And so this means that you can run it in a serverless way that scales down to 0 or up to as many instances as you need. But you also might be saying, I'm integrating it with web applications. So I have a web application front end, and then I'm going to process maybe an order through an event that comes through for Azure Functions. And so we allow you to host it onto app services. If you're familiar with those and you have web applications there, you can also deploy it onto Azure container environments. And so if you're building microservices architecture, you want to have kind of a unified networking and management layer where all of your containers, your functions, your Spring apps can work together in a unified way in a microservices architecture, then you can deploy that function app directly in there and take advantage of it as well. And because it's open source and the runtime is open source, all of the programming model capabilities are open source, it also gives you the ability to deploy it into your own environment. So you may have a Kubernetes environment either up in Azure or even on your own premises, and you can decide I want to deploy my function app there as well. A lot of flexibility in how you host your application. And then the last thing, obviously with everything that's kind of serverless, it's really about how do we make it as cost effective as possible for your application. And what this really means is we dynamically scale the compute based on your application needs. So if it's not that busy in the evening or at night, it'll scale down all the way down to 0. If there's nothing happening in your application, all the way up to hundreds of instances if you really have a high load that you need to process at peak times during your day. So this kind of dynamic capability of only giving you compute allows for really cost-effective deployment and management of your applications. So what are some of the services you can build or solutions you can build with serverless functions? So there's a list that I've called out here. These are more of the common kind of categories that we see our customers building when they're using Azure Functions. The one we focus on a little bit today is these intelligent app capabilities. This is really, starting to take off. A lot of people are trying to, how do I take advantage of all of this AI, ML work that's going on in the industry? How can I enhance my applications to bring in the Copilot type functionality? Does serverless functions give benefits there? So we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But there's a lot of kind of existing and new scenarios that are being built with real-time data processing. So a lot of what customers are trying to do is not store their data and then try to process it async. They want to be able to add that business logic directly into their real-time processing so they can respond to customers or partners in real time. And serverless functions allow you to take all of that data as it comes in and process it so you can react to whatever your organization needs to build. There's common workflows and orchestrations that are available. So we have durable functions capabilities, allows you for state management. There's a whole set of patterns that open up that allow you to not just build stateless applications, but stateful applications as well. And these can be long running. They can require human interaction. They can also do different patterns like fanning out and then getting the results back. So a whole set of capabilities that are available to you for workflow and orchestration using durable functions. The scheduled task automation, we see a lot of customers who want to be able to enhance their DevOps capabilities by building automation directly into the cloud. And with event-driven automation that calls functions, you can now respond to events, alerts, anything that goes on across your Azure services and process those using common languages like Python or PowerShell. IoT, another very common one. There's so much data coming in from organizations. They want to be able to process that data as it comes in. So a lot of IoT devices are sending up the events, and you can either host our open source code directly onto the Kubernetes, or you can process it as it comes through in our backend. And then web applications. Obviously, one of the big things we customers do with functions is build serverless APIs. And these serverless APIs allow you to build web mobile applications, allow you to kind of scale your different APIs as you see fit inside your organization. And all of that is using our built-in programming model for HTTP triggers. So with that, that's kind of a quick overview of what Azure Functions is, what are a lot of our customers doing with Azure Functions. So hopefully it gives you some idea of what we're offering here, but also an opportunity to ask some questions about these different scenarios, different capabilities we offer in Azure Functions. So I'll stop here for a second and I'll see if any questions have come through. I'll hand over to Ramya, see if she's seen something come through or a question that she could answer from you guys. Hey, Ramya.
Hey, Min. Yes, I do see a question. It goes this way. So, what are the various tools that can be used to quickly generate Azure Functions code samples for various function supported languages? So there are several tools and resources available that can help customers get started for creating the serverless applications. And even also talked about this, about the local dev experience and deploy to Azure and using the CI/CD pipelines as such. So let me talk about some of the commonly used tools, right? Like one of the most used tools is the Azure portal. It provides a user-friendly interface for creating, managing, and deploying your Azure functions. And then there are Azure core tools that are available for which provides a local create, develop, and run experience. You could also debug them and deploy to Azure functions as well. Apart from this, Visual Studio Code also provides a development experience for creating, testing, and deploying Azure functions, and same with Visual Studio as well. So, but there is a common component across these tools which helps generate those code samples, right? Which are called Azure Functions templates. And these are available for various programming languages, including C#, JavaScript, Python. And so these templates provide that starting point for creating different types of functions of the respective functions extensions, right? Like HTTP triggers or timer or event hubs or Cosmos DB. And these templates are actually powering these tools that I just mentioned. And it also helps with generating those code samples. Apart from this, we encourage you to visit the Azure Functions GitHub repo and the respective extension repos as well for quick starts and samples. And of course, the Azure Samples repo as well. There are several reference architectures and code samples available, and Azure Docs. Paul, I think we've also discussed several times on the quick start experience. So do you also want to add to this?
Sure, yeah. I mean, looking at the scenarios that Eamon posted, we want to have quick starts. Yeah, something cool that you can do in 5 minutes to handle an event and put in your logic. So we've been publishing a lot of those to the Learn Azure Functions docs. It is every language. We show the latest and greatest programming method to do it. We've even, I think Eamon will point to it later, we've even got one now for using LLMs, AI, and Langchain. So that's pretty exciting. So yeah, we are really working hard to make sure it's easy to get started. And then once you get started, go all the way to a really high scale.
Perfect. No, thanks, guys. Yeah, so definitely ask some questions that come in. We'll answer some more along the way. But with that, I think Paul mentioned, one of the goals we see a lot of customers doing is, how do we take advantage of these LLMs, these kind of large language models, some of the orchestration SDKs that are out there? What are some of the scenarios that you might want to build with intelligent apps, taking advantage of this large language models? So with that, I'm going to kind of switch back to the next slide and kind of show you, what are some of the common scenarios we see customers doing today that maybe you can also do inside your organization, start thinking about doing some prototyping, as well as what are some of the capabilities Azure Functions offers. So when you think about intelligent apps, and you're trying to kind of add this, real kind of LLM intelligence, either you built your own models, you want to integrate with Azure OpenAI, you want to use search functionalities. How do you kind of build that same Copilot experience, that same chatbot experience, enable kind of that rich interaction from your customers or inside your own organization on top of your own data? There's a whole set of scenarios that kind of open up that's really exciting at the moment. A lot of customers are, building out prototypes, and they're trying to understand, okay, how do I really enhance my existing application using AI? And so one of the things we see a lot of customers doing is like building serverless endpoints for chatbots and assistants. And so, you have all this data. It's either in your own organization's data you've imported, or you're directly interacting with LLMs like ChatGPT, but you want to be able to expose that to your front-end customers to be able to offer a richer experience as they, use your application or your website. The second very common scenario we see customers doing is they have a lot of data in their organization. And so what they want to be able to do is to have those questions and those interactions and that knowledge base be available as part of their LLM experience as well for customers. And so what they're doing, there's a common pattern that's evolving, and you can see it. A lot of customers are starting to go down that path, which is retrieval augmented generation. And what this really does is it allows you to take your data and then bring it in a semantic search way into a vector database. And so when you have your own data, this can be like your own documents, it could be your website, your help content, your support content, whatever you have in your organization that's kind of your intellectual property that offers real value for your users. You can bring that into a vector database that you can do search on top of. And then when you get those results, you can then pass that with the knowledge that you're trying to get the LLM to use into OpenAI. And so it'll take that information plus the data that's is used for that information and pass it into LLMs, and then they'll do their magic of using that as a reference when they come back with that great answer or great content or co-pilot experience for your customers. The other one that's starting to appear a little bit, it's very early, is a lot of customers are trying to enhance their LLMs and Azure OpenAI, or even OpenAI in general, using plugins. And so what plugins allow you to do is to kind of bring real-time data and real-time integration into your LLM experience that you're offering for your customers. And so you can see there's open betas out there today for Azure OpenAI. OpenAI has their own, and it's really about enabling partners, but also large organizations to kind of add more value on top of the LLM by creating these integrations into your own data source. And often this is real-time information, stuff that you have very specific that the LLM doesn't know about. And then the last part is obviously helping parsing data into the right format. So if you are in the kind of data science role, or you're moving from a developer and you're getting involved in bringing your own data into these training models, part of the challenge you often face is they require a lot of formatting of the data and being able to get the data out of all your systems for that training experience. And so a lot of customers are looking for a way to do that, and an optimized way that using our serverless capabilities in the cloud. And so when you think about all of this, what does Azure Functions provide for your intelligent app? So those are kind of the core scenarios that we see customers building today. Some are already out, some are a lot in prototype. I think most of us, and probably you as well, are in some stage of your kind of AI journey. But when you think about Azure Functions, one of the benefits we have is because we do this scaling all the way from 0 up to hundreds of instances, it allows you to offer this capability based on the demands of your specific customers. So you might have some apps that don't get a lot of usage during the daytime or at night, but then others that really take off and you see a lot of benefit. So you want the backend system that's supporting this to scale based on the needs of your application. And that's one of the things serverless is really good at, and Azure Functions. The other thing that is we offer in Functions are those triggers and bindings I talked about. And so when you think about the challenge of bringing all of this customer data, maybe it's documents, it's website, it's email, support data, everything in your organization that you want to be able to do semantic search on and be able to take advantage of LLMs, then one of the things we offer with our triggers and bindings is we will be able to get those events. So like uploading the document is an event, maybe adding something into a blob store is an event, maybe a new email is an event, a support request is an event. So as those things come through, we have a lot of built-in integrations that allow you to take that data, and then because we hand it over to you, you can do those common retrieval augmented generation scenarios and stick it into your vector database for future search. The HTTP trigger, again, I talked about a lot of customers are trying to, how do I expose these chatbot experiences to my front-end web apps? And so what you can do with serverless is, because we have nice integration with APIM, you can build these serverless APIs and then make those available to all your different clients that are trying to expose different capabilities, either through chatbots or through just have ability to kind of augment and supplement the content and the website that, or the application that they're using. The fourth one that I called out here was durable. I mentioned earlier that a lot of times there's kind of steps along the way. There's aggregation of data. There's a lot of tasks that has to run in parallel and then aggregate the results back. And there might be some approval type stuff that goes on. There might be some memory you need to keep as you go through your chat experiences. And so one of the benefits is using durable functions is it's really built for those types of scenarios. And so you can bring it into your application. If your AI solutions start to get more complex, then you can take advantage of durable functions. And then the last thing is the portable programming model. And this is really about giving you the ability to deploy those intelligent applications you built with Azure Functions onto that whole set of environments I talked about earlier, from serverless environments to app service plans, container apps, and Azure Kubernetes Service. So a lot of flexibility on where you want your intelligent app to run and how it needs to integrate with the rest of your application in a consistent way. So again, a lot of kind of built-in capabilities. We see customers taking advantage of Azure Functions when they're building these type of intelligent apps. And if you're thinking about these types of scenarios, then hopefully you'll look at us, look at some of the samples, and be able to get kind of a jump start on offering that value directly into your own applications.
So,
Okay.
Eamon, looks like related to this, we've got a question from Fuel Snable. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And so it's people are talking about Langchain, but are never able to explain it. Can you explain it in a way that we can all understand it?
Yeah, so with Langchain, in some ways, we could call it like an orchestrator SDK. So it's an SDK like any other SDK that you'd be using to interact with services. But what Langchain offers is it allows you to have another level of abstraction on top of all of these LLMs. So you might be using OpenAI, you might be using Azure OpenAI, you might be using your own LLMs, you might be using your own vector databases. And so what it gives you the ability is to create an abstraction on top of all of those services, so that when you build your applications, you build it using Langchain, and you can basically point to different services you need as part of your overall application. So it allows you to have that level of abstraction, be able to switch in different services as your needs are there. It also allows for some common capabilities like completions and chats and memory that you want to do. So if you want to store interactions as they go back and forth between your LLM, it has some built-in capabilities that allow you to do that automatically. And so you can do all of this without Langchain. It just requires more code and it would a bit less flexibility. And so that's what Langchain offers you. Similarly, semantic kernel, that's available. It's a very similar orchestrator SDK. It's really trying to accelerate your development as when you're building these intelligent apps and gives you some flexibility to interact with them. That's really all it does, but very powerful because it does give a lot of that flexibility.
And see if you agree with this. The way I think about it, I key into the word chain. So we're chaining a lot of individual things together. And I think you already mentioned all those, like we're going to build prompts. We might go retrieve memories. We might go retrieve more context and data from a vector database. Each of those are kind of individual tasks, but you want to do them in a chain to create that end-to-end. It's almost like a workflow or a pipeline. Is that how to think of it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I definitely think, if you're building these intelligent apps, you can start with the core SDKs. There's nothing wrong with starting with Azure OpenAI SDKs, all of the other, if you're using Pinecone for vector database, you can use their SDKs. But if you want this kind of abstraction to be able to, like maybe as Paul said, chain things together, have a bit more flexibility on how you want to pull things together, and some built-in capabilities like memories, then Langchain or semantic kernel is one of those popular SDKs. And there's more out there beyond that that you can use. Okay, with that, maybe I'll hand to Sonia to check if any questions or comments came in, anything else that people are interested in that we can answer.
Yes, I can see a question. What are the new versions coming up and any improvements on programming models? So yes, one of the things Azure Functions does support, like Eamon mentioned before, is the variety of programming models, because we want you to, come with the language of your choice. So we support, apart from .NET, of course, Node, Java, Python, and PowerShell with first-hand support. And the new versions that are coming out right now or in the upcoming few months would be Node 20, Java 21, Python 3.12, and PowerShell 7.4. In addition to these newer language versions, that we always try to make sure we support the latest and the greatest in as short of a time span as possible after the community release. In addition to that, we are also working on programming models. So newer programming models for Python and Node. Right now, Python is GA already, and Node would be GA just in a couple of weeks as we speak. Now, what are these new programming models? They're basically making it easier for developers who already know Python to come on the functions platform and develop function applications, leaning towards fewer functions concepts and instead emphasizing on Python principles. So when we GA'd our Python new programming model, we did have a blog out there. So do check it out if you're interested. And some of the key improvements include triggers and bindings being declared as decorators, simplified folder structure, and easy to reference inline documentation. So just making it easier for people to developers to write their function apps in the language of their choice. Similarly, for Node, we worked on a more flexible folder structure. You would now be able to define your functions in code, new HTTP binds and new HTTP types, and a better IntelliSense while writing your function apps. The whole motivation behind it is to just make it easier for customers to write for potential developers to write their function apps in the language of their choice, using things that they already know and minimizing concepts that they would need to learn.
I think we got a lot of feedback, right? That, if you want to configure bindings or triggers, you would end up defining and declaring a lot of JSON, which feels like configuration. And then a Python developer might look at that and say, hey, I'm used to writing that as code, or Javascript developers used to writing functions. Is that kind of why we did some of this?
Yes, exactly. And we did user studies where we realized developers need to learn some more function concepts before they can start writing their first function app. And so we wanted to leverage the language principles and make it more idiomatic to the language that the developer is already familiar with. That was the theme and the motivation behind doing this work with the new programming models.
Yeah, no, awesome, Sonia. Yeah, and they're out there. If people please try them. Some are GA, some are in public preview, but we'd love some feedback. On this, we're really trying to make it easier for developers to kind of jump in, add that value as quickly as possible, but bring all of their knowledge and skill they've learned in those languages forward. You don't have to start over. We want you to bring that knowledge forward. Okay, with the last couple of minutes, I'll just show one of the demos that's available for you to go and try today. So actually, I'll go back to the deck because I think we only have a couple of minutes, and maybe I'll just walk there and I'll put a link out to where customers can try it as well. So in this slide here, you'll basically see a demo that Paul has actually built. It's up on GitHub for customers to use and to try out when they're using functions and trying to get a sense of what does it mean to actually integrate into Azure OpenAI? What does it mean to use these LLMs? How can I use, people were mentioning earlier, what is Langchain? Like, what can I do with it? Or maybe you're trying to use semantic kernel. And so there's an example up there on that aka.ms/Langchain. And so it's up open source, up on GitHub. You can try it yourself. And really what it does is it builds a very simple kind of scenario where you might want to take a prompt, so a question from a customer, submit that into an Azure Function HTTP trigger, and it'll take that prompt, and then it would basically use Langchain to kind of connect, or you could put in semantic kernel to kind of connect into the different services. In this example, it connects into Azure Cognitive Services using Azure OpenAI to basically add some system content and system data into those queries. So you want to tell like the LLM how they want to respond, what kind of data they're interested in, and then you pass that prompt in along with it. And so Langchain does that for you very nicely, and so does semantic kernel. And then it passes it into the Azure OpenAI to get that results and then send that back up into your front-end application. Maybe it's a website, maybe it's a chatbot you have, maybe it's just adding content to a kind of a Copilot experience. But it's a very common way of just interacting with these, getting started, and all of it is up there on the GitHub. And not just a sample function code, but a full end-to-end experience that integrates with the Azure Developer CLI. So you can try it on your local machine, and then you'll be able to deploy it automatically as well and create all the resources into Azure. So with that, I know we're down to our last minute. And so hopefully this was kind of a view into what are intelligent apps, what are Azure functions, what can you start doing with them, how does Azure help you to get started and really start to embed your experiences into your own applications. And if you want to learn more, definitely come to Ignite if it's an option, or watch it online. There's lots of new enhancements we're doing. There's demos around intelligent apps. And obviously the core documentation and the GitHub samples are a great place. I put a couple of references in here for you to get started learning more and hopefully start to really take advantage of this intelligence into your own applications going forward. So with that, I'll stop and thank everyone for joining. Thanks for asking the questions. If you're watching later, really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining. Paul, Ramya, Sonia, awesome to have you presenting as well. And thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.